Hey, Motorman here with a new video titled The Ride Like a Pro Experience. Now, this is not a series that you have to buy to get all the information from my other Ride Like a Pro videos. This video will contain all the information from my other videos plus much more. As always, I'll be explaining the 3 techniques you need to master and apply. The techniques are the proper use of your head and eyes, the proper use of the friction zone, and the proper use of the rear brake to help you maneuver at low speeds. These techniques will work on every 2-wheeled vehicle. Right up front, let me say that link brakes have no effect on your ability to use the rear brake only during low-speed turns. Neither do ABS brakes. I must stress that you need to follow along in the order I show these exercises, since each exercise builds towards the next one. Here's the tools you'll need. Okay, here's all you're going to need to set up a course. You probably have most of this stuff laying around. You're going to need a tape measure. Probably a 100-foot tape measure is best. A measuring wheel, and you can get these any place, Amazon, Walmart, whatever, probably $10 or $12. And you're going to need some type of markers. Now, I've got 3 types here. This is the flat soccer cones, they call these, available any place, very easy to carry and stack. But here's the only problem with these is if you hit one of these with the front tire of your motorcycle with it leaned over, there is a possibility it could cause you to go down. So if you get these, got to be very careful. They're good in that you could see them from quite a distance away. These are called MSF cones for Motorcycle Safety Foundation. You can find these on Amazon. These work really well because you can run them over. They just pop right back up. It's impossible to hurt them. So they're very good to use. But you are going to need at least 6 of this type cone. And the reason you want 6 of these is because, as you'll see in the first exercise we do, you're going to be swinging and swaying around these cones, and you want to be able to not knock them over. At first, when you're getting into this, yeah, you're probably going to knock a few of them over, and you could start with the smaller cones and then test yourself. Put up 6 of these, go through the same exercise. If your bags or the back of the motorcycle is hitting the cones and knocking them over, you know you're not swinging and swaying enough. Before we go too in-depth with the techniques, I should mention counterbalancing. Now, that simply means that whatever way the motorcycle leans, I'm going to keep my weight to the high side. If the bike is leaning to the right, I want to stay straight up on the motorcycle. If I'm making an extreme turn where it's 18 feet or less, I'm going to actually move my butt right off the seat and get all my weight onto the high side. It's not a big deal, but you may find it helpful. The most important thing, of course, is the 3 techniques, so don't worry about this till you get a good handle on the techniques. The 3 techniques we'll be talking about throughout this video, and there's just 3 of these techniques you need to learn. First is the proper use of your head and eyes. Wherever you turn your head and eyes, that's where the motorcycle will go because your hands will naturally follow your eyes. This is extremely important. You want to look only where you want to put that front tire. The faster and further you turn your head and eyes, the tighter the turn you'll be able to make. The second technique is the proper use of the rear brake. You want to put a little bit of pressure on the rear brake when making tight, low-speed turns. This is going to help stabilize the motorcycle at low speeds. And this motorcycle, by the way, has linked brakes. That doesn't mean anything. We're using very light pressure. It's not going to affect the front at all because most people know that if you hit that front brake when the handlebars are turned, it'll pull you to the ground like a magnet. But link brakes, not going to have an effect. You're only using light pressure. If you're pressing so hard on that rear brake that it affects the front and starts to pull the motorcycle down, you are using way too much pressure on the rear brake. Some people refer to this as dragging the rear brake. It's just a little helper. The last and not least technique is the proper use of the friction zone. The friction zone is the area of clutch travel between completely open when it's released and completely closed. Throughout these exercises, you want to stay in that friction zone, that gray area. It's probably on most motorcycles about 1 inch wide, so you'll be manipulating that clutch in and out of that gray area within that 1 inch. It's never all the way out, and it's never all the way in. If you let the clutch all the way out while making low-speed turns, the slightest movement of the throttle will cause the bike to straighten up and leap ahead. That's the last thing you want. So you want to stay in that friction zone. And we're going to show you several ways for you to find that sweet spot and be able to ride in that friction zone. While in the friction zone, you need to feed some throttle. You cannot be at idle. So we're going to bring the RPMs up somewhere between 1,500, 1,200 in that area. If you have a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder motorcycle, you might need a little bit more revs, up to 2,000. And you could either blip the throttle constantly to stay above idle, or you could hold a dead, steady throttle. And I'll also show you an easy way if you're having a problem holding that throttle steady. I'm going to show you a tool that will work perfectly for that purpose. If you're having any serious problems holding a steady throttle, because you got to keep those revs above idle, you can get one of these. It's a very inexpensive throttle lock, and you can get these on eBay or Amazon for 15 or 20 bucks. And it's simply a rubber band. I'm going to slide over here. I'm going to clip this on, and it'll help me to lock the throttle at low RPMs. I'm going to urge you not to use one of these anywhere on the street. It's only for a big empty parking lot, because you could make a mistake and turn the throttle the wrong way once it's locked. So you don't want to do that. This is just for practice in a big empty parking lot like we have here. I'll show you how it goes on. Put the rubber band on. Clip it. I'll turn the throttle just a little bit, and it locks the throttle in. You could still use the throttle. You could even push it forward, but simply by pushing this down, it'll hold your RPMs at the exact RPM that you need, which is, as I said, 12 to 1500, depending on the type of motorcycle. This is just a little helper. Once you get used to using the friction zone of the clutch, you could eliminate this altogether. Now, I understand watching these friction zone exercises might be a little bit boring, but please bear with me. You must learn to use that friction zone. It is extremely important. If you're having any problems at all, you should go through every single one of these friction zone exercises I'm about to show you. And don't worry about slipping the clutch. The vast majority of motorcycles are equipped with a wet clutch. That means they're cooled by oil. It was designed to allow you to slip the clutch at low speeds. Here's another way of testing your friction zone knowledge. And remember, you got to be really good with the clutch and throttle, that friction zone. Get a 2x4. Put it just in front of the rear tire. You should be able to easily ride up, stop, and go over the 2x4 without the 2x4 moving. If the 2x4 flies up behind the motorcycle, you know you let the clutch out way too fast. If that happens, you've let the clutch out too fast. The idea is to keep that 2x4 as if you weren't even on it. So you got to be really good with the clutch and throttle. It's an easy exercise. If you having any problems with the friction zone, that's another way you could learn to really use that friction zone well. Now I'm going to show you another way to do it. Another easy way to find that sweet spot of the friction zone is to pull your front tire up against a curve. You want to feed a little throttle, let the clutch out just a tiny bit till you feel that curb holding the motorcycle back. You want to do that for the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, then stop. Rest for 3 seconds or so, and then try it again. If you stall the motorcycle, that means you've gone too far into the friction zone. Very simple exercise, and it will help you find that sweet spot. Do not let the motorcycle stall. Before performing any of the exercises, you have to get a good handle on using the clutch and throttle, i.e. the friction zone, and keeping a little bit of pressure on the rear brake. Got to keep your head and eyes up. The best way to get a good handle on the friction zone is to try the slow race. That is, ride in a straight line at about a walking pace. Your speed should be 3.5 to 4 miles per hour. If you're not sure what that speed is, because you're not going to be able to look down at your speedometer, have somebody walk alongside the motorcycle, as you see here. If the person walking alongside has to start running, you know you're going too fast. It's a slow walking pace in the friction zone, a little pressure on the rear brake, your head and eyes up. If you're having a problem holding a steady throttle, use that throttle lock. He's got his hand up. Jason has his hand up so you can see that he's got that throttle lock right about 1200 RPM, and he's going at a slow walking pace. Now, if you think you've got a good handle on the friction zone, here's an easy way to test yourself. What you want to do is the slow race, but in a big circle. It doesn't matter the size of the circle. Just make sure you're not having to put a foot down. If you have to put a foot down, make sure it's a quick dab, and then the foot comes right back up onto the floorboards. That should look like this. You want to keep the bike straight up. Turn your head and eyes. And remember, you're at a slow walking pace. It's much easier if I pick up speed and allow the motorcycle to lean, but this is to test yourself and see how good you are at using the friction zone. If you can do this, you should be ready for the very first exercise. Now that you've got a good handle on using the friction zone, your head and eyes keeping them up, and a little pressure on the rear brake, it's time for the first exercise. We call this the slow cone weave. Notice that the bike has to weave through the cones. As I said, probably start at 15 or 16 feet apart, whatever you need. This is just practice, so it doesn't really matter, but you want to get it a little bit of a challenge. So you want to start with a big loop as you go through. The bigger the loop you start with, the better. Get that bike swinging and swaying, turning those handlebars left to right to left aggressively. The more aggressive you are in this exercise, the better. Remember, your speed should be 8 to 10 miles an hour, depending on how far apart you have the cones. The further apart the cones are, the faster you'll be able to go. The closer they are, the slower. When they're at motor officer size, probably 8 miles per hour would be about your top speed. That means 12 feet apart. But at 15 or 16 feet apart, 8 to 10, even 12 miles per hour, depending on what kind of motorcycle you have. The shorter the wheelbase on your bike, the easier this is going to be. But any motorcycle, if it's got two wheels, one in the front and one in the back, it's going to work. And you should take you about 3 or 4 times through before you feel that bike really swinging and swaying. You want to get that motorcycle dipping. That's the whole point of this exercise. All right, this first exercise is called the slow cone weave. What we have here is a series of cones in a straight line, and I've spaced them at 15 feet apart. The better you get, the closer you can make the cones. The point of this exercise is to get you to feel that bike swinging and swaying, and to make you realize that nothing horrible is going to befall you if you simply turn your handlebars back and forth. You want to look at least 3 cones ahead, and your speed should be about 8 to 10 miles per hour. The biggest mistake I see with people doing this is looking at the cone right in front of them. That's no good. You might miss this cone, but you're going to hit the next one. The second biggest mistake is going too slow and trying to do this at a slow walking pace. You can steer through it, but that's not the point. The idea is to get you to feel the motorcycle swinging and swaying. The more swing and sway you have, the better. So first I'm going to show you what it should look like, and then I'll show you the most common mistakes. You want to start with the motorcycle way out away from the cone. Looking way ahead, swinging and swaying. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And then turn your head and eyes and go back. I'll show you that again. Swinging and swaying, looking way ahead. 8 to 10 miles an hour. Keeping power to the rear wheel while in the friction zone. Turn my head and eyes and go back. That's what it should look like. And now I'm going to show you the most common mistake, and that's this. Starting really close to the cones, trying to steer through with the motorcycle straight up. This is hard. This is difficult. I see it all the time at my classes. And then the looking down. You look down, you tend to, of course, hit the cones. And then sometimes they got to stop and start all over again. Got to keep your speed up. I know that your brain is going to tell you to go as slow as possible, but your brain, your instincts are always wrong when it comes to riding a motorcycle. The more swing and sway, the better. You want to feel that bike dipping. Now, if you notice up here, I have this U-turn area because I know so many people, the most important thing to them is to be able to make a U-turn. So you could use this slow cone weave and lead yourself right into a big U-turn. Now, I've got this measured off at 27 feet. If the tightest U-turn you could make is 40 feet, that's fine. Start with 40 feet. And here's the biggest mistake people make with the U-turn. They get up here, and they have a marked off area, and they look at the cone that they don't want to hit. And they try to keep the motorcycle straight up, and it's very difficult, and they wind up having to duck walk the bike like some kind of doofus, and they look at the cone, the thing they don't want to hit, and of course the motorcycle will then hit the cone. So do not do that. When you get into that U-turn, you want to snap your head and eyes and look over your left shoulder. Here's the U-turn area, 27 feet. I snap my head and eyes and look behind me. I don't need anywhere near 27 feet to do this. Anytime I want to make a U-turn, I simply snap my head and eyes and look over my shoulder. Now I'm going to have several motorcycles go through this, and we're using a pretty good variety of bikes here, and we'll show you what it looks like with several motorcycles swinging and swaying. It looks pretty when you're doing it right. Okay, this is a Triumph. I would call this a scrambler or an adventure tourer. These techniques work on every single motorcycle. Head and eyes, friction zone, a little pressure on the rear brake, and get that bike swinging and swaying. Looking way ahead. And on this big Indian, the same thing, exact same techniques, head and eyes, friction zone, little pressure on the rear brake. The more swing and sway you got, the better. Turn your head and eyes and come on back to the exercise. You need to keep your RPMs steady, and you need to keep them about 12 to 1500 RPMs. Now this big Triumph has a long wheelbase, long rake, but as you see, the techniques still work. Doesn't matter what type of motorcycle you got. If it's got two wheels, one in the front and one in the back, the techniques work. It actually looks pretty when you're doing it right. Head and eyes up, friction zone, little pressure on the rear brake, swinging and swaying. Speed's about 8 to 10 miles an hour. Turn my head and eyes, easily turns the motorcycle. All right, once you get good at weaving through the cones without knocking them over when they're 15 feet apart or even 16 feet apart, it's time to tighten it up. What I'm going to do here is put it down to motor officer size, which is 12 feet apart. So I'll move these cones over. I already got it painted out. It's just a matter of turning your head and eyes quicker and turning the handlebars a little bit faster. So I'll move all these cones down. And you'll see how it is, exact same thing, just everything has to happen quicker. All right, we've now got the cones at 12 feet apart, motor officer size. In fact, that's Jay Callie. He's a motor officer out of Texas. As you can see, technique remains the same. It's just got to happen a little bit faster. Now we'll do the same exercise at motor officer size on an Indian Chieftain. It's a little bit longer motorcycle. But as you see, the techniques still work. It's got two wheels, one in the front and one in the back. As you can see, techniques work on every motorcycle. That's a DCT Goldwing automatic transmission. He's using the throttle against a little bit of rear brake. Goldwing in the back. It's a regular standard shift. Of course, these exercises and techniques can be done two up. Nothing changes. If you normally ride with a passenger, you better be able to do this two up. This next exercise is called the offset cone weave. It's a series of left turns and right turns. And notice these S-shaped turns or teardrop-shaped turns that the motorcycle must make. The point of this exercise is to feel the bike transitioning quickly from complete left lean to complete right lean. The reason that's important is out on the street, if a car pulls out in front of you and you don't have enough time to stop, you're going to have to make this exact maneuver. If you try it for the first time at a middle of a busy intersection, I guarantee you, you're going to look at the car that pulled out in front of you and you're going to hit them. If instead you've gone through this exercise and you've practiced turning that motorcycle quickly from extreme left to extreme right, getting out of the way of that vehicle will be a piece of cake. So remember, S-shaped turns, that's very important. You do not want to zigzag. A zigzag would be coming through here and going directly to this gate right here. We call it a gate between these two cones, because if you do that and you go straight over here, you've got to turn 180 degrees to get back, and that's very difficult. We like to do things the easy way. This is what the motorcycle was designed to do, this type of turn. It does not want to turn straight up and make 180-degree turns. This exercise, the offset cone weave, this extremely important exercise. So many people are confused as to how to set this up, even though with every one of my videos I give you a practice guide that shows you how to do it. So I'm going to explain this as simply as possible. We have a row of cones right here. They are spaced at 30 feet apart, and you could put as many of them as you want, as big as the parking lot that you have. Put more and more of them. We call it a gate, by the way, between this cone and that cone over there. You could make it 6 feet apart, 8 feet apart, whatever you feel comfortable with. So now we set up another set of cones here, also 30 feet apart, where they're going to walk over this way. They are 24 feet from inside cone to inside cone, all the way over here. So this would be 24 feet. What you want to do is put a little mark over here, because now we have to do the offset. The offset should be 15 feet. So if you measured right there, that would be 15 feet offset from the other set of cones. Left turns and right turns. It couldn't be easier than that. So I pull into the gate, focus on the green. I turn my head and eyes and look over my left shoulder. I want to bring it back to the left before I go to the right. Now I look over my right shoulder. Now I look over my left shoulder. The head turn comes just before I enter the gate. Speed through here, again, 8 to 10 miles an hour. So I enter the gate, get close to the green cone, turn my head and eyes and look over my left shoulder. Just before I enter the gate, I look over my right shoulder, making S-shaped turns. Speed through here is at least 8 miles an hour, and you can get up to 10 or 12, depending on what kind of motorcycle you have and how good a lean angle you have. S-shaped turns. This is what the motorcycle was designed to do. It doesn't want to turn straight up. You got to be able to lean the bike. To lean the bike, you got to be above 5 miles an hour. Next, I'll show you the wrong way. The biggest mistake I see people making. Number one, going way too slow. It's very difficult to do this slow, as if you were doing the slow race. But I see this all the time. 3 or 4 miles an hour, not turning the head, then turning it very slowly, turning their head, trying to keep the bike straight up. And then they don't turn their head fast enough to get inside the gate, so they have to go around the gate. Then they start duck walking the bike like this, and it looks really bad, and of course it doesn't work. The other mistake I see in this is zigzagging. Instead of making S-shaped turns, people try to go straight to this gate, and now they must turn the motorcycle 180 degrees to get back. And that's very difficult to do. If you just allow the motorcycle to lean and you turn your head and eyes, you'll go through it quite easily. S-shaped turns. Allow the bike to lean. Little speed. As long as you're above 5, you're okay. Anything below 5, there's a good chance you could drop the motorcycle. We've got several bikes running through here, so you could certainly see these S-shaped turns, but please do not try this until you're extremely proficient at this exercise. If all the riders aren't keeping up, you're going to have a collision. And this rider has been through the course before on his DCT wing. You might have seen him before in my YouTube videos. And he's fairly proficient at it, still working on it. Could use a little bit more speed. His head turns are good. He is leaning the motorcycle. As I said, these are just left turns and right turns. You need to feel that motorcycle transition quickly from left to right. This is a Triumph Thunderbird. Long wheelbase, I believe it's 67 inches. 32 or 34 degree rake, so it's a fairly long motorcycle. And the biggest mistake he's making right now is he's at idle. You actually need a little bit more than idle, so he's not slipping the clutch quite enough. Notice his foot had to go down. That's because he's going kind of slow. He's leaning okay. If he would pick up his speed, it would make it a lot easier. Still, that's way better than the average rider going through their first time. This is Victoria Pierce. She's on a stock Road King police bike. It has not been lowered or modified in any way. She is 4'10". Size and strength of the rider has no bearing on their abilities. In addition, she hasn't been on a motorcycle in 5 years. And this is her second time through in 5 years. What this rider has is an understanding, a complete understanding of the techniques, and a zero fear level. Fear is what holds so many people back from riding properly. Get over that fear, and you get over it by practicing. Do it over and over until you got it. This rider's trying this for the first time. Totally missed a gate, not turning his head at all. And his speed is too slow. Barely any power going to the rear wheel, making it extremely difficult. If you don't turn your head, you can't make it through. Trying to keep the bike as straight up as possible. Very common mistake. Allow the motorcycle to lean, look the same way as the rider is looking. The passenger should stay close to the rider when making low-speed turns. Don't lean on the backrest at this time. The closer the passenger is to the rider when the bike is leaning and turning, the better. That keeps the weight in the center of the motorcycle. All right, now to take this exercise to motor officer level is quite simple. If you set it up just like we have it, 24 feet apart, 30 feet long, all I have to do is take that outside cone and move it in so that it's now the inside cone. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and I'll do it all the way down. It's extremely tight turns. Probably on most motorcycles, you're going to be going lock to lock. You got to really turn your head and eyes very fast to get through these gates, and you got to allow that motorcycle to lean, and you better make S-shaped turns or it's not going to work. Here's Joe. He's not a motor officer. He does know the motor officer techniques. He's the father of that little bitty 4'10" girl you just saw go through this on the Road King. And that is a Triumph Venture Tourer Scrambler, short wheelbase, short rake, easily makes it through this exercise. The closer you get to the outside green cones, the better chance you have of making it through. If you miss it by just a couple of feet, it makes it so much more difficult. Now this is Tim Hamilton. He's a home inspector, but he knows the motor officer techniques. He knows how to use them. He's got excellent head and eyes, knows how to use that friction zone, rear brake, and he makes it through easily. The trick to this is, as soon as you pass through the gate, as soon as you pass that green cone, to turn your head and eyes very quickly back so that you're looking at that green cone again. We'll show you what it looks like. And this is my wife, Donna. She'll show you what this looks like. She turns her head and eyes and gets right back through that gate again. You want to practice this in both directions so you could make right circles and left circles. You don't have to do every one of them, but you might as well. You got them set up. And I know that a lot of people are going to ask when they watch this video what mufflers those are on that bike. Those are Tab Performance 4.5 slip-on mufflers with the zombie baffles. They sound great. Here's Jay Callie on the DCT wing. Remember, on this motorcycle, there's no clutch. So you got to find that sweet spot between the rear brake and just the correct amount of throttle. In my experience, that takes a little bit longer to get the hang of it on the automatic DCT than it would on the clutch. Of course, you may differ, but I just wanted to show you this can be done simply by using a little throttle against a little rear brake. The brakes are linked, but it doesn't matter. You're not pressing that hard on the rear brake. Now, I've talked a lot about the friction zone, the area of clutch travel between completely open and completely closed. And when you're traveling at these low speeds, you've got to stay in that friction zone. Well, of course, this motorcycle doesn't have a friction zone. There's no clutch at all. But you can still use the techniques in that you're going to use throttle against a little bit of rear brake. If you press very hard on that rear brake, it will affect the front and probably tip the motorcycle over. But we're using very light pressure. I would estimate somewhere around 5 to 8 pounds of pressure, would you say, Shay? 5 to 8 pounds is all you need. And you got to find that sweet spot between enough throttle and enough brake, and it's going to take some practice, but you know, you got all the time in the world. These motorcycles have an excellent lean angle. I believe it's 40 degrees, so you could really lean the bikes over. In fact, you could actually lean them further than you can the Harley Davidsons. They have a 32-degree lean angle. If you take advantage of that lean angle and you know how to use that throttle against just a little bit of rear brake, you can do just what you saw here. And this is Ivan Diaz, not a motor officer. In fact, he's a doctor on that Indian Chieftain. He first came to me a while ago, probably 2 years ago, and he was on a 800 Suzuki. Did fairly well, not great, but fairly well. And 3 or 4 months later, he came back on this bike, and he'd really done some practicing. As you can see, he's got the techniques down. That's not the easiest bike to ride. It's a big, heavy motorcycle. But as long as you use those 3 techniques and use them to the fullest, use those techniques to the extreme, that's what separates the amateur from the professional, is the ability to use the techniques to the extreme. All the riders you see in this group are members of my Ride Like a Pro team. We've practiced together all of these maneuvers for many years. Each rider is well aware of the other rider's skill level.
Don't try this at home, kids, until you're extremely proficient at the techniques.
All right, now that you've done some big circles in the offset cone weave, we're going to now do it in a confined area. So I'm going to measure off a 24-foot circle. There'll be cones all the way around. The trick to it is, notice this little dip. That's the dip we learned in the first exercise. You want to dip the bike in towards the cones, and you want to look only at the green cones. I have 2 green cones. I have one here and one there. As soon as you get close to this one, it's already time to look at the opposite side. There's one turn of the head. That's it. Your head shouldn't be bouncing back and forth. It's one head turn. Look for the place you want to put that front tire. When you get back to this side where the green cone is, you want to immediately look over here. You could make as many circles as you want. We're leaning the bike now. Our speed is 8 to 10 miles an hour, depending on the type of bike you have and how big the circle is. At 24 feet on a Harley-Davidson, 8, 9, 10 miles per hour is fine. You hear the pegs start to scrape or the boards, it's just a warning that says you're reaching the limit of the lean angle not to go any further. But you got to find those lean limits at low speeds under controlled conditions, not when rounding a turn at 50 or 60 miles an hour. If you're not familiar with your motorcycle's lean angle and you're coming around a curve at 50 and you hear that scraping sound, I guarantee you, you will straighten up the motorcycle, you'll look to the edge of the road, and you'll run right off the road. If you practice finding those lean limits under controlled conditions out on the road, it'll be easy. All right, I'm going to pull in by this green cone. I'm going to dip my motorcycle to the right so my front tire tracks right alongside the cones. And the only places I'll be focusing is on those green cones. Looking for that green cone. Now I see it. I look for the next one. There it is. I'm good for about 3 of these before I get dizzy. And then just pull out. I want to make sure I can do this in both directions. So I'll pull in, get right alongside these cones, turn my head and eyes, and find those green cones. It's that easy. Never look at the cone right in front of you. Here's a very common mistake I see: people going too slow and they stare at that cone right in front of them. And when you do that, now you try to turn, it's difficult because you're going so slow and you're going to wind up hitting the cone and driving out of the exercise. Don't let that happen to you. I see it every day at my class. Don't let that happen. Get in, commit to it, get your speed up to about 8 or 10 miles an hour, and the bike will practically do it on its own. All right, now, when you get really good at this and you're ready to up your game, what we're going to do is narrow this down to 18 feet. And I'm going to put a little entranceway in it, so it'll be pretty tight, and you better get really close to those cones at 18 feet because there's very little room for error. At 24 feet, you got 6 feet to screw up and still make it, but at 18 feet, not much room at all. When it's this tight, very little room for error. This is motor officer size with a 5-foot entrance gate. Should be able to do this in both directions. Notice that aggressive dip. All right, we have an intersection set up, but the first thing before we run the actual intersection, we're going to practice our U-turns within 24 feet. 24 feet is your average side street that you might want to make a U-turn. You have 2 12-foot lanes, of course, that's 24 feet. And notice this dip right here, that's the dip you learned in the first exercise. That's why you did it. It makes everything, every low-speed maneuver you ever perform will be much easier if you use the dip. And we want an aggressive dip right here. We want to focus on the green cone that you'll see in the video. As soon as the front tire gets close to it, you'll snap your head and eyes and look over your left shoulder. You'll look exactly where you want to go until the motorcycle straightens up. You will never, ever look at this side, not even for a split second. Once you commit to turning those handlebars and leaning the motorcycle, look over your shoulder until the bike straightens out. Never look at this side, never look at the end of the leg. Turn that head one time. Don't do a double take. This is the double take, and if you remember the Little Rascals TV show, it's a comedy thing. You don't want to do that. It's one head turn and as far over your left shoulder as you could possibly turn your head until the motorcycle is going in the direction you want it to go. All right, now we're going to do the U-turn in a confined space. Confined meaning it's 24 foot wide. Notice this cone that's sticking out. That's because I want to dip around this cone, focus on the green tipped cone, snap my head and eyes, and look over my left shoulder. It's one turn of the head. It's not a double take. It's one turn of the head, and I'm going to turn my head as fast and as far as possible. That dip that I'm going to make is going to be an aggressive dip. You don't have to do the dip, but believe me, it makes things easier. I'll show it to you. Again, speed right about 8 miles an hour. I dip aggressively. I snap my head and eyes. And I got plenty of room left over. Now, if you want to do this, motor officer size is 18 feet. Notice what we have here where the line of cones are. There's 2 parking spaces to that white line over there. That's 18 feet. So you don't even have to move any cones if you want to try the 18-foot turns. But you better be really good at 24 before you shrink it down to 18. So this is the 18-foot turn. Same technique, nothing changes. Same thing right here, 2 parking spaces. One more time. And that's Jay Callie, Ivan Diaz, Alex, I can't pronounce his last name. And a couple of people, as you saw, screwed up. They looked at that cone. What happens when you look at the cones? You tend to hit them. Let's see if he does it again. A little wide. Little Victoria, little bitty girl, hasn't ridden in 5 years, gets right on a full-size Harley Davidson, whips the bike around like a toy. Ladies, this has nothing to do with size or strength. It's 90% mental and 10% physical. He missed that dip, didn't get close to the cone. Then he looks at that cone, he gets awful close to hitting it. Again, this is an advanced exercise. What we're going to do is a U-turn from a dead stop. We're going to try to do that U-turn in under 18 feet. So here's the drill. You want to turn the handlebars full lock. You want to put your foot up on the brake. You want to bring up the revs a little bit and start letting out the clutch until you feel it, the brake grabbing. And whenever you're ready, keep that head turned and go. It. Don't try this until you're ready for it. If you want to try a U-turn from a stop within 24 feet, the drill is going to be the same, except you don't have to start off at full lock. You could start off at half lock.
I'll show you that now. All right, so now we're going to do the U-turn from the stop, but we're going to use the 24 feet. So don't start off at full lock. Turn the bars about halfway between full lock. Same thing, we're going to let the clutch out a bit, bring the revs up, but the head has got to be turned all the way back this way. Go. A U-turn like that from a dead stop within 24 feet shouldn't be more than 20 minutes of practice, especially if you've gone through the order I've showed you here, and I've said how important that order is. All right, now that you've completed a U-turn in the intersection, we'll have it set up so that it's 24 foot wide. Each leg is 36 feet long. If you have any kind of a problem with that, if it's too difficult for you, just make it wider. There's no rules here. If you have to start at 28 foot, if you have 3 parking spaces, that's 27 foot. And it's very easy to set up if you just use the lines in the parking lot. But we have it set up so that it's 24 foot wide by 36 feet long. The longer you go into the leg, the easier it is. So if you want to put your legs at 40 feet, that's fine. But the way we have it set up is 24 by 36. And notice these dotted lines. That's the path that the motorcycle needs to take. So though the intersection, the outline of it is actually straight, there is no straight part to this for the rider. You're going to come in. If you come in from here, you dip the motorcycle out. As soon as you dip it out, you'll turn your head and eyes and look for the green cone, which will have about 10 or 12 feet from the end. As soon as the motorcycle gets near it, you'll snap your head and eyes just as you did in the U-turn, because that's what we're making here is a U-turn. Turn your head and eyes to the left. As soon as this turn is completed and the motorcycle is at this point right here, you're already looking for that next green cone. And you're going to repeat that all the way through so that these are teardrop shaped or S-shaped turns, however you want to look at it. The only straight part is as you're first pulling in, you'll go straight for 10 or 12 feet, and then you'll dip the motorcycle out, and you'll be dipping and turning all the way around. A lot of people find this, doing all these U-turns, easier than a single U-turn because you get to build up a little bit of a rhythm. And again, speed through here, 8 to 12 miles per hour, depending on what kind of motorcycle you have. The better the lean angle, the higher the speed you can get up to. Once we get through this intersection, we're going to put a figure 8 inside of one of the legs because you've already got this set up. I'm going to show you that next. All right, now it's time, since you completed the 24-foot U-turn, to run the entire intersection, and it's just a series of U-turns, and you get to build up a little rhythm. And remember, there's no straight part to this. You want to, right about here, dip the motorcycle out and turn your head and find that green cone. You do not want to wait till you pass this corner cone. If you wait until you pass it, what will happen, if you turn your head here, this turn is going to be so wide, you'll wind up going over the imaginary double yellow line. You'll have an imaginary head-on collision. So don't do that. Dip the bike out way back here. This is the point where you dip it out and turn your head to the right and look for that green cone. And you repeat that process. As soon as that U-turn is completed, you're already looking in the next leg before you ever get there. Bike is never going straight. It's turning in one direction or another. You want to feel that motorcycle transition quickly and easily. The intersection is so versatile, you can do so much inside of it. If you're only going to set up one exercise, make it this one. You can practice your circles, your U-turns, figure 8s. You can do it all in this measured out spot. Just so you get an idea of how much room is actually in this intersection, we'll have all the motorcycles run through it at one time. This is what it should look like, folks. When you're riding with your friends, they should have the same skills as you have. It should look like a practice drill team. And of course, to look like a practice drill team, you gotta practice. You'll find riding so much more fun when you actually know what the hell you're doing. Should be just as good turning to the right as you are to the left. If you're not, that simply means you need to practice more to the right than to the left. Here in America, since we ride on the right side, most of your U-turns will be to the left, but you should practice in both directions. Now I'll show you a variation of using the intersection and making turns. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull into the first right turn. I'm going to try to come to a stop, or almost a stop, turn my head and eyes quickly, and go down each leg. Each time I finish the U-turn, I'm going to try to come to a stop and then continue through. This is an advanced maneuver. So I pull up, I try to come to a stop, turn my head and eyes. My U-turn is completed. Stop, and then continue on. As soon as this U-turn is completed, I try to bring it to a stop, and then go on. Nothing changes when you turn into the right. Head and eyes, friction zone, little pressure on the rear brake. I find that green cone, except there's no green there this time, but I just look at the orange cone. That pivot point should always be about 10 or 12 feet from the end of each leg. You need to be just as good making right-hand U-turns as making left-hand U-turns, and this is the best way to practice it because you're doing a whole series of them at one time. All right, here we have the figure eight, and we're going to set this up inside of one of the legs of the intersection because you've already got the intersection set up. So we're not actually going to mark off a figure eight. We're just going to use the leg. Now, when you do this and you do the figure eight in one of the legs, if you're going to do a 24-foot figure eight, make sure that leg is at least 48 feet long. So it's the same thing as you pull in. You want to dip the motorcycle. You want to turn your head and eyes and look for the green cones. You should have two on each of these circles. Turn your head and eyes. As soon as you find them, the handlebars start to turn. You turn your head and eyes, and it's really quite easy. You want to focus on the middle point. We call this a crossover point because that's where the motorcycle is going to cross over every time. So I like to draw a little X right on the ground here. Now, I know you shouldn't be looking down, but you could see that X with your peripheral vision. No reason to stand down and look at it. So every time you cross that X, turn your head and eyes and try to find that X again, and the motorcycle will go right to it. All right, now since we've got the intersection set up, and it's a very versatile exercise, you could do circles in here, U-turns, everything. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a figure eight in this leg of the intersection. All I did was stretch the intersection out to 48 foot, so that'll be, think of two 24-foot circles. I put an X in the middle. Every time you run over that X, you need to snap your head and eyes and find it again. The sooner you find it, the tighter the turns you're going to be. The idea is not to come past the edge here, or of course, past the cones on the other end, and you do not want to look at the side cones at all. The X is your main focus. Turns her head and eyes, finds the X, runs it over, turns her head and eyes, and tries to find it again. Lots and lots of room to make a figure eight in that leg when it's 24 feet wide by 48 feet long. You don't have to be a motor officer to learn the motor officer techniques. We've got here my wife, secretary, flight attendant Mary Ann, and an attorney with Victoria.
Of course, you'll never have to do a figure eight out on the street, but practicing this maneuver forces you to use the three techniques to the extreme. It builds overall strength in your riding abilities. The stronger rider you are, the more skillful you are, the better and the safer you'll be out on the road.
This is the motor officer size figure eight, 2 parking spaces wide, 18 feet, 2 parking spaces long. If you can do this without going over the lines on the sides or the length of the 2 parking spaces, you can do every exercise on the motor officer course. That X in the middle, that's your crossover point. As soon as you pass it, find it again. After every 10 or 15 minutes of practicing, you want to do what we call a breeze out. That's simply cruising around the parking lot, get out of the friction zone, let that clutch out all the way, get off the rear brake, take a couple of turns around the parking lot 2 or 3 times, let the motorcycle cool down. It's not brain surgery, just a cool off period. Or you could just let the bike sit for about 10 minutes after every 10 or 15 minutes of practice. All right, this exercise is called the snowman, and this is something that people find probably the most difficult of the exercises. What we have set up here is the first circle is 30 feet, and you're going to be going to the left. The second circle is 26 feet, you're going to the right, and the last one is 24 feet to the left. So you'll pull in, and again, you'll look for those key cones, green one here and a green one there. You want to track right alongside. You want to look into the next circle for that green cone. Turn your head and eyes. Here's a green cone here. Turn your head and eyes, look back here. And you'll come through the last one. The 24 foot to the left would be the tightest one. Again, green cone and green cone. That's the only places you need to look. Now, you could set this up any size you want. If you want to make it 30 foot, at motor officer size, it's actually starts at 22. It goes to 20 and then to 18 feet. But that's for an advanced rider. Don't try that at first. Make the circles as big as whatever makes you feel comfortable. It's a 34-foot circle. That's fine. Make them gradually smaller. And remember, never look at the cones right in front of the motorcycle. Only focus on the opposite sides here where you're going to put a green cone. Those are your focus points. As soon as you get close to them, you're already looking for the next place you want to put that front tire. All right, now we come to the snowman. A lot of people find this difficult because we have so many cones. It is not really a confined area, but because we have that many cones, it looks confined. This first circle is gigantic. It's 30 feet. You're going to do 30 feet to the left. You're going to pull into the next one. It's 26 feet to the right. And then the very last one is 24 feet to the left. And here's the big mistake that people make in the snowman. Instead of tracking right alongside the cones, they stay 4 or 5 feet away from the cones. Now you have to make a decreasing radius turn, and that makes it more difficult. Now in this big 30-foot circle, yeah, you got a lot of room for error. But when you start getting into the smaller circles, there's not near as much room for error. And I find especially when they pull into the circle where they're going to make it to the right, I'll show you that. So you'll be coming out of here, tracking alongside the cones. If you don't get all the way over here to where this green cone is, if instead you start your right-hand turn over here, you've lost a whole bunch of space. Now you got to make a decreasing radius turn to the right. That's a little more difficult. And the same thing in the last circle. So use all the space you have. I'm going to demonstrate it, and then we'll show you this space is big enough to put several motorcycles in, as long as you don't look at the cone right in front of you. If you look at the cones right in front of you, you're either going to have to drive out or you're going to knock the cones over. I dip it over here, look for the green. I look for the next green. Tracking right alongside the cones, I look for that first green over there. Now I'm going to get it all the way over to the left side. Turn my head and eyes, find that green cone. Find the next green cone. Green cone over here. Turn my head and eyes, there's another green one. Now I look for that first green one where I came in and pull straight out. Plenty of room in there if you use all the space you have available. And of course, you can work it in both directions. All right, this exercise is a counter steering or push steering exercise. Because we're going to be above 15 miles per hour, we need to push on the bars. If I want to go left, I push forward on the left grip, the bike leans left and it goes left. I push forward on the right grip, it leans right and goes right. Everything we've done up to this point has been below 15 miles per hour, so we've been turning the handlebars in the direction that we want to go. But now, since we're going to be above, in fact, we're going to start this at 20 miles per hour. Notice these cones are in a straight line. They're 30 feet apart. 20 miles per hour is the perfect speed to practice this on. You want to look as far ahead as possible. You do not want to look at the cone right in front of you. If you look at the cone right in front of you 30 feet away, you're going to think you're going 100 miles an hour. So look as far ahead as possible and simply push on the handlebars to get that bike to lean and sway and go around these cones. Remember, we're not handlebar steering. We're pushing on the bars to make the motorcycle lean. The only way to make a motorcycle lean at speeds above 50, you have to push on those bars. That's push forward. It's not a push down, it's push forward on the bars. Push forward on the left grip, the bike leans left and goes left. Push forward on the right grip, it leans right and goes right. All right, this is the brake and escape exercise. I'm going to start at 20 miles per hour. I'm going to head to that first gate, brake hard, release the front brake, and then make that jog. Now we're going to up the speed to 30 miles per hour. You want to do this a little bit at a time. Braking hard, release, and make the swerve. You need to be able to brake from any speed you're likely to be riding at. If you ride on the highway to 80 miles an hour, you need to be able to make a quick stop from 80 miles per hour. Got to practice that on a deserted road. All right, this is very important. You got to be able to pick up your motorcycle, especially when you're practicing these maneuvers. Now the bike is laying on its right side, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you put the kickstand down on the other side, because when you pick it up, you don't want to drop it over on the other side. This is really a technique. It takes a little bit of strength, but it's more technique than it is strength. So what you want to do is grab the grip, pull it to full lock. You want to grab the crash bar, put your butt against the seat, and start walking backwards, right up onto the kickstand. If it falls on the left side, well, you don't have the kickstand to help you, but the technique is going to be the same. You want to pull it to full lock, grab low. The rear crash bars is a good place. My butt's against the seat, and I'm just going to start walking backward. Once I get the bike up enough, kickstand down, It's really as easy as that. When you practice this, probably best to do it in your garage at home and have somebody there just in case you can't get the bike up. You have somebody there to help you. The biggest fear that people tell me they have is they're afraid to drop their expensive motorcycle. Well, I'm going to take that fear away from you completely, because this is the best invention I've seen in years, and we've got the actual inventor of these here, and he's going to demonstrate this to you. But this motorcycle is equipped with what's called motorcycle drop guards. That's a 3/8 thick metal piece. There's one here, there's one under the primary, and there's another one up front, and of course on the other side. You could drop this bike 10, 12 miles an hour, slide it across the ground, and there is absolutely no damage to the motorcycle. It's complete, total protection. That fear of dropping your motorcycle is disappeared. It's gone. You don't have to worry about it. I'm going to show you how it works. Now, I'm betting that looked ugly. But let's take a look at the motorcycle. Absolutely no damage. No part of the actual motorcycle touches the ground. It's just the drop guards. Now, you do get a scratch on the drop guards, but the powder coated ones, just give it a shot of black paint and you're good to go. Or you could leave it, because you can only see it if you actually lay on the ground and look up at the drop guards. Primary cover is completely protected. Rear saddlebag is completely protected, as is the muffler. No part of the motorcycle is actually touching the ground when it tips over. Even with a tip over like this at about, what would you say that was, 8 or 10 miles an hour it went down? 12 to 15. And still the bike is in perfect condition, so that fear of dropping the motorcycle and damaging it is completely gone. All right, I'm here with Jay Callie. He is the inventor of motorcycle drop guards. He's a motor officer instructor, and he knew that a lot of times police officers in their training, they're going to be dropping their motorcycle. In fact, he's from Houston. They have to buy their own motorcycle, so it's their bike they're dropping. And what would happen is when they go to trade in the motorcycle, Harley-Davidson would charge them a fortune if there were scratches on the crash bars or the primary. Now, the crash bars are how much, Jay?
About $250.
So that's $250 for the crash bars. And then the primary, which a lot of times gets damaged on a 214 or newer, 2014 and newer Harley-Davidson, the primary will actually hit the ground. And I've actually seen where it bends the cover and you can get some oil leaks. But with the primary cover on here, it does not touch the ground. How much, if they had to replace that whole piece, what's that run?
The primary cover runs about $400 to $450 plus your labor and your gaskets and fluids.
And in the back, the rear crash guard, if you got to
$250.
$250 for that. Now, the ones on this motorcycle are powder coated black. You can get either powder coated black or the stainless steel. The stainless steel you saw on my bike looks just like chrome. It is complete and total protection. No part of the motorcycle actually touches the ground except for the motorcycle drop guards. Okay, that's it, folks. We've done every exercise, and if you come to my class, this is exactly what you're going to be doing. And I know when people come to my class that have my video and practice prior to getting there, they are head and shoulders above anybody else. When you practice, please do so in the order I showed. You got to get a good handle on the friction zone first, and then start going through the exercises. Obviously, if you practice for an hour, maybe 2 days a week, you would really pick this up kind of quick. You don't want to go through the entire course, though you can if you have room to set it all up, or you could set up 1 or 2 exercises at a time, master them, and before you move on to the more difficult exercises, you want to master the one you're working on now. Just 3 techniques: head and eyes, friction zone, little pressure on the rear brake, and it's amazing what you can do with an 800 or 900 pound motorcycle. And we're going to show you on here several different motorcycles going through the course. As I said, if the motorcycle has 2 wheels, the techniques work. The only difference being if you've got an automatic transmission motorcycle like the DCT, you don't have to worry about the clutch. It's just a matter of putting a little pressure on the rear brake and getting the right amount of throttle, and of course, turning your head and eyes. Till next time. This is my wife, Donna. You've seen her in all my YouTube videos and all my Ride Like a Pro videos as well. And the number one question I get from people about her is, how does she keep the throttle so steady?
I've tried both aspects or both techniques. You do the blip blip. I've tried it. I feel more comfortable just holding a steady RPM and slipping the clutch in and out.
So it's just a matter of practice
Exactly.
and finding what you like.
Right, feeling comfortable doing it my way.
And the other question we get about you, as you see her demonstrating all the exercises, is the ponytail.
Oh.
She did not cut a hole in the helmet. We don't do that. That's just a stick-on.
It's a stick-on.
And where do you get those from?
Anywhere online, just type in ponytail, helmet ponytails.
So that mystery is solved. All right, I'm here with Marianne Hamilton. Marianne, you've been with the Ride Like a Pro crew for how long now?
Since 2005.
2005. It seems like yesterday, but it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
And how did you get your initial motor officer training?
Actually, from my husband. That's how I got the initial, but he had learned it from a motor officer, so he taught me the exact same techniques.
And you're a little tiny thing. I'm not going to ask you your weight, but you look like you're about 105 pounds, maybe 106 at most. A little higher. But the point is, little bitty thing, you handle an 800-pound bike with the ease of a child's toy. And one of the things that Marianne does that it's really a beautiful thing to see is she is the poster child for counterbalancing. That is where you move your weight to the high side of the motorcycle. And did somebody show you that, or is that just something you picked up on your own?
Both. I picked it up on my own because it was able to reach my handlebars better by doing the counterweighting, and then also was told about it before, and then start implementing it in my riding.
Basically, what you want to do is get your weight over to the high side. So if the bike is leaning to the left, you want to keep your weight to the right. You can do that simply by moving your shoulders over, or if it's a really tight turn, you could actually get your butt off the seat and really get all the weight as possible over to the high side. That's really not necessary unless you're trying to make turns of less than 18 feet, but it is a good idea to get to where you're sitting up straight and the bike is leaning under you. Hey folks, I'm here with Victoria McLaughlin, previously Victoria Pierce. Now I met Victoria about, what was it, did we figure 12 years ago?
12 years.
You were 15 years old at the time, and you came to one of my classes because your father said you would have no problem riding one of these motorcycles, even though you're only, what, 4'10"?
Yes.
Because I know sometimes you say 4'11", or you identify as a 4'11" person.
My license says 4'11".
4'11". So the license, she's actually 4'11". But so many people think that because if you're a shorter person, you can't ride a full-size motorcycle. Actually, it's all technique. And Victoria's gonna, in fact, before you came here today, you hadn't been on a motorcycle in how long?
5 years.
So no riding at all in 5 years?
No.
And you saw what she's able to do with virtually no practice. I mean, I think you had like a 3-minute warm-up.
Maybe 3 minutes.
Well, we were kind of in a rush. We're filming.
Right.
So we just had a couple of minutes. By the way, she's now an attorney, and you flew through law school in, what, half the time is normal?
Yes, I got my undergraduate degree and my law degree in 5 years total.
That girl. Maybe being very smart has something to do with riding the motorcycle well. But she is, as you see, a tiny little thing, rides a 850-pound motorcycle with ease of a child's toy. And because she can't reach the ground or even reach the kickstand, I'm going to show you how she gets on the motorcycle. If she's by herself, this is what she has to do. So as you can see, what she can only balance the bike on the one foot. And I'm going to walk around and show you this. There's no way her other leg is going to reach the ground. And she's going to show you how she gets on the bike and how she does this. Okay, she makes sure the motorcycle is in first gear.
Turn a full lock.
Hops on the bike. Then she can start it up and take off. Complete control of the motorcycle because she knows the technique so well. Amazing. So guys, you're out there, you're saying you're kind of short, you want to lower your bike, that's the last thing you should do. Learn to ride that motorcycle, get yourself some technique, and you won't have to worry about touching the ground or flat-footing the motorcycle. Same thing for you ladies out there.
Hey, Motorman here, and I got something for you totally different. What you're looking at right here is the Z Pro drop deck trailer. I said drop deck. It is the most innovative drop deck trailer on the market. These, by the way, are made in America, made in Indiana, in the factory. This particular one is the 2-motorcycle trailer, but it's not just a motorcycle trailer. You could put a golf cart on here, trike, a Can-Am Spider, a golf cart, large lawnmower, anything that you want to load on here. And what makes this special is you have two ways of doing this, by the way. This has the optional power deck. So I'm just going to hit a button and the trailer will go down so that you don't have to drive up a ramp, because I'm sure you've seen all the, on YouTube, there must be 100 videos of the horror stories of people trying to load their bike with a ramp. This completely takes that worry away. Now I'm going to show you how it works. So the first thing to do is we're going to pull this pin out. There's one on the other side. I've already pulled that one out. Now watch this, because it's really cool. Now it's flat to the ground, so there's no ramp to worry about falling off of. And this one is made for 2 full-size bikes. And I'm going to pull them on here and show you exactly how this works. This trailer is equipped with the optional Condor chocks. They do a pretty good job of locking the front tire in. Just pull in, up and over, and you can step off the bike. It's locked in now. You can get off the motorcycle and it's not going to fall over. I would, however, tie it down first before putting the other motorcycle on. Once you've got both motorcycles on the trailer, this is the time to tie them both down, make sure they're secure before lifting up the deck. Once the motorcycles are tied down, just press the button. And you're good to go. It couldn't be any easier. You don't have to worry about dropping the motorcycle, trying to get it up there. This is the safest way. By the way, they do make single trailers. In fact, if you wanted something custom added to your trailer, they will do that. These are all made in-house, in fact, handmade at the factory in Indiana. To unload, it's just the opposite. Press the button, lower the deck, untie the bikes, and you're good to go. Now, I know I'm going to hear from a lot of so-called bikers who are going to tell me, I would never trailer my bike. I ride every place, rain, sleet, snow. I'm like the post office. Come on, I live here in Florida. If I want to take a ride up to the mountains, I got to go 500 of the most boring miles you could possibly imagine up to the North Georgia area. It's much better to put the bikes on a trailer, get to where you want to ride, and then have a nice relaxed day of riding. While you're cruising up there, if it's pouring rain, you're in your car or your truck. You don't need to worry about bad weather. Get a trailer. Everybody's going to use one sooner or later. Plus, as I said, there's a million different uses for this trailer. It's not just a motorcycle trailer. As you can see, it fits golf carts, side-by-sides, trikes, anything that you want to put on this trailer. It's extremely versatile. You will get your money's worth, and it is a first quality piece. You can get it with a hand crank. If you don't want electric, save you some money, or get the electric. I kind of like the electric one. Just hit a button, it comes up, put the pins back in, and you're ready to go. That's Z Pro Trailers.
Helmets for Motorman and the Ride Like a Pro crew were provided by Super Seer. Super Seer makes the finest motorcycle half helmets money can buy and are the leading manufacturer of law enforcement helmets in America. Visit them on the web at superseer.com to see their full line of motorcycle helmets.